So I've been thinking recently about my time in Austin. Like, been here for like 2.5 years, and how fortunate I've been to have great connections and meet awesome people. But just the conversations that happen in the city, like I'm sure you can relate to it. Like friends, mentors, people you work with, people just operate at a much different level. And it's always cool to have one-on-one conversations with someone, and then have a platform like this that we can bring that conversation to life and impact thousands of people. So, Ryan, welcome to the show. We had a great conversation last week, spent some time together over the summer. So excited to just dive into more mindset, real estate, everything you got going on. So thank you for being here.
Dude, awesome to be here. Like I said, I appreciate you providing the platform to share these thoughts, these ideas. Austin is a unique place. Like, holy cow, coming from a different city to Austin and like having some of the conversations, especially with younger people that are already doing these big things. It's super cool to be around, and like having this platform to share some of the conversations, to a wider audience is cool. So thank you, man.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited for it. So we talked recently, you went through a course on mental toughness basically, and building more strength in your discipline, consistency, mental performance. So I want to touch on this because you're someone that you just get shit done. Like in business, in life, you're consistent, you're disciplined, you're doing a Murph every single Monday. So I admire you in that sense of like, if Ryan wants something, he's going to go get it. And no matter what the schedule is, like I'm going to make it happen. So let's talk about your journey with mental toughness. Were you always someone that were like, hey, I am always going to set the standard super high and execute? Or did you have difficulty staying disciplined earlier in life?
Dude, that's an awesome question. I think I always expected a lot of myself, like from a very young age, especially like I started with sports, like that was my scene. That's what crafted like a lot of who I am now. I think I had that expectation, but I didn't understand like half of what went into that mindset, or even like what kind of effort it would take to get results. Like I always just assumed that results would come. Like I was kind of the kid in practice that would try like 50% because it like didn't feel cool to try.
Yep.
Or if I was losing, I would be like, oh, I'm like, it's because I'm like not putting my full effort. I would just make excuses around that. And then as I've gotten older, I realized like those excuses aren't going to get you anywhere. Like someone's got to just do the work. So like that transcended from sports into like business. And I really thought about like, what do I actually have to do to get to what I want? So it came down to like a lot of the thinking was like, what do I actually want? And then in order to get there, like what actions do I need to take? So like, it started off very loose and like very, almost just like so passive around like, all right, I want to like win a championship, let's say for this sports team, but like, I'll just like show up to practice and then let's hope that we can, I'll play good enough that day, not really thinking about it, not also doing like the pregame training or some of the things we can do to prepare to like get the results we want, to now I think very intentionally about like, what do I actually want? And then am I doing the right things to get to what I want? So it's far more intentional now than before. And like, you can't blame yourself when you're like high school, college, you're kind of, you're not very thoughtful. At least I wasn't. So like that's changed a lot, like how intentional I've been around like getting closer to my goals.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think your thoughts really dictate your actions, and
yes,
everybody can relate to that. At a younger age, it was not the cool thing to try. Like gym class, sports, like the cool kids were always the ones just like slacking off or like showing up late, and that was the norm. And it's crazy to think that, because now like you look at someone who's not living to a high standard and you're like, what is wrong with that person? Like they're not going to get opportunities. They're just going to fall apart for them. But most people don't have that wake up call of like, hey, I'm actually doing the wrong thing by cutting corners and trying to not be a try hard. Cause that was a thing growing up, is like, oh, this kid's a try hard. You were made fun of for it.
Yeah, totally. And like when I first started my career, I was fully under that impression of like, there's going to be a shortcut. Yeah. There's got to be a quicker way. Like because it worked in high school where I could kind of show up half-ass and then still sometimes get these results, Or like even when I was younger, like same thing. Like you can still luck into certain results, especially in sports, because like something could just go your way that day and you can win. But like your actions and your behaviors and your efforts don't always, you know, align with like your probability to win. In that case, where like now, like especially so my first job out of college was like a real estate broker. Like I was like, I'm gonna make the big bucks. Like if you close 3 deals, let's just say, you can make $500,000. I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be balling. I'm gonna be making more money than any of my friends, and like that's gonna be it.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was really the route. And then you start looking at like this path or that path, and it's like for any career, any business, any anyone. It's like there's going to be a lot of effort that goes into that. It's not. I have explored so many options through like what's the easiest way to get all these things I want, and what I found is like there's not an easy way. I mean, sure you could luck out and be, win the lottery or something, but like probability wise, I don't think there's an easy way to like make it in business.
Yeah. So how do you start to change your actions when you have that realization? Because that's a tough path to go down of, I'm not going to get lucky. I'm not going to have any shortcuts. I need to start putting in more work, thinking more intentionally about my tasks and goals.
Yeah.
So now it gets a lot more difficult. And maybe waking up is a little bit more difficult because you're not just like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I want today. Like I actually need to put in work. I need to show up as my best self.
Yeah.
How does your mindset now change from I'm going to cut corners to now this is more serious and there's a lot more work required? How do you stay down that course and make sure you're on the path to success?
Dude, such a good question. I would say, like you said, it's a realization. Like no one is going to do this but me. Like, what do I really want? And it takes some introspection and like almost thinking about, like for me, I go pretty far out in time. I'm like, what am I going to be saying to my grandkids? On my deathbed, I have those thoughts. Like, I've been having those thoughts since I was in high school. I was like always curious, like what my life is going to look like. And I think a lot of that is like having so many older influences in my life. So I got to see like how they did it. And then I saw like, the people that are successful are the ones waking up earlier. So I'm going to start waking up earlier.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are going to be like going to these networking events. So I'm going to start going to networking events. So it really was like, I got to look at what I'm doing now and be totally honest. Like, is this going to get me closer to my goals? I answered no to a lot of the things I was doing. And I still do this occasionally, but like going out and drinking, right? Like that was one of the biggest things I changed. Like even when I was back living in San Francisco, I was going out both nights of the weekend. And it's like, when I'm out, I'm not doing anything to get me closer to my goal. And like, especially when I was there, my goal was to buy property. Like I was obsessed with the idea of buying my first investment property. And when I'm out drinking at a bar, that means I'm not doing something.
Yeah.
So then what I did is I flipped, like, what can I now do to get me closer to that? So instead of going out on Friday, I was starting to stay in. And I was reading like a Bigger Pockets book, or I was on YouTube taking notes in my room when my friends were out. And it was like, that's a sacrifice I was willing to make because I felt in the long run, like I'm looking at all this as an investment into my future self that would pay dividends to stay in that night. Or to, start doing the Murph every Monday. It's like, that's an investment in my health. And there's so many things I had to look at. Like one of the biggest things was my relationships, dude. That was a crazy one. And it's like, I'm still very close. I'm very fortunate for the friends I have. I feel like I hit the gold mine, but there's certain relationships that I just wasn't able to invest in the same way I could have before, because it's like, I could not believe that environment is any more important. Yeah. I think environment is like one of the number one things we can do to like at least put ourselves in a better position. As you know very well, with this collective space and like the communities you surround yourself with, like I had to look at relationships, and that is arguably my number one like priority.
Yeah.
Like like my own health, of course. Like I want to make sure I'm in a good space for other people and myself. But like then the next thing for me, like one of my core values is just relationships and like investing in people. And there were certain people that I had to stop investing in.
Yeah.
And that was a big switch up. And it's not like bad blood. It's just like I felt like that was part of this this process to like keep growing in the direction I wanted to.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you just go down different paths. And if you keep going down that path of someone that's being around someone that's not going to make you excel and make you a better person, then you're cheating yourself, and it's just like making you worse. And by association, your standards start to slip, and it's a dangerous place to be. So I really like that of like, sometimes you see hey, no bad blood, but like, we're just not on the same level right now. Yeah. And one thing you mentioned was having an honest conversation with yourself. Am I the person who I need to be to achieve my goals? It's hard to look yourself in the mirror and say no, right? Because we want to say like, no, I'm doing good. And a lot of people avoid that conversation. They avoid looking at the bank account. They avoid looking at those goals that they set on January 1st because they're so far off of them. Yeah. They avoid stepping on the scale. They avoid, doing the actions that get them to their goals because they're afraid. And you're afraid of failure, afraid of what people might say about you. You're afraid of, hey, what's going to change when progress happens or imposter syndrome comes in. How difficult was that first conversation with yourself? Because I had something similar where it's like, I am not qualified for this life. And it's a difficult time to look at yourself and say, you need to change. What was that moment like for you?
I'm not sure there was one moment. Like, I feel like I kind of still to this day, I think almost every day I look at myself, I'm like, what am I avoiding right now? Yeah. Due to a fear, right? I think there's always something, but the conversation was pretty, I think, avoidant at first. Like you said, it's easy to avoid the harder things. It's easy to avoid the difficult conversations, especially with yourself. I was fortunate in the sense that I had I had work experience, and I'm tying this to like career, but this could be tied to anything. But like, I had a work experience that really did not align with what I wanted or like any of my values, and it made me so motivated. Like, so again, there wasn't like one conversation. I just knew that like there were moments of like working in like the corporate system or like working for other people that was like, I know this is not what I want. Yeah. And that made me so fired up to be like, okay, like now I've because knowing what we don't want helps us figure out what we do want, right? So like now I have better senses of what I do want, and I want like some freedom, right? Because I've had the boss that's like always looking down your shoulder and like, calling you on holidays, that kind of stuff where like, you're like, dude, let me just take a breath. Like, let me just live a little bit. And I think that's what ultimately motivated me more so than like looking myself in the mirror and being like, you suck. Like it was mostly just my life experiences and like very quickly identifying that's not the life I wanted to live. And then figuring out more so like, what is the life I wanted to live? So what that conversation looked like was me going into nature or like, pen to paper, sitting in my room with, one light on, just like thinking and like staying up till like sometimes 1 a.m. journaling down like, all right, like where am I at? Yeah. Okay, cool. Like where, like what would a great life look like? Like, I don't want to think about like, what would a good life look like? Man, like what's like an ideal life? I would really like to identify like the things that I need to do to get to that ideal life. So then I wrote down, like one time I remember very vividly, have you read Vivid Vision? No. It's a great book. I think it's Cameron Herold. But he writes a book. It's like, write out what your life is going to look like in 3 years, but write it out in the present tense as if you've already had these things. Gets a little bit into the manifestation space. But I did that. I remember vividly, I was going through a transition because I was in a W-2 corporate job. And then I had, essentially, it was a mutual agreement that I was not going to work there anymore. So I had a decision to make. I could go and right back to LinkedIn Jobs and go find something else, or go to Indeed, find that. Or I always had this itch to do something, entrepreneurial, or I can go start this business. But where I started was like, I was on a family trip in Maui, and I remember taking a full day where I just brought my journal out, pen and paper, and I just sat on the rocks, looking out in the ocean, just thought. And I was like, I'm not going to leave until I have like at least 3 pages full of like what I want my life to look like. So then I wrote it all out. And then after I wrote it all out, I went back to my computer and I typed every single note up and then made some tweaks as I thought were necessary. And then here's the exercise we were talking about, but thankfully AI is brilliant and we can get a lot of answers pretty quickly through there. So I put in all the things I wanted for my ideal life into AI. I said, okay, if I want to have a family, let's say potentially, a family of 5, what's that going to cost? If I want to drive these 2 cars, what's that going to cost? If I want top of the line health services, so let's say I want to work at a collective or weekly massages, that kind of stuff, like healthy organic food, that you might make. Like, what is this lifestyle really going to cost? And then I had ChatGPT spit out like, hey, these are the numbers. This is how much you need to be making. Like, when do you want to start your family? All right, let's say between 30 and 35. So by that time, you're gonna have this life, and part of it, like, I do want some of the nicer things, like, and that's just what I want. But like, that's gonna cost you at least $500,000 a year to maintain that lifestyle.
Yep.
So then I look, all right, what jobs on Indeed or on LinkedIn are gonna get me that?
Nothing.
By that time, I mean, the options are slim.
Yeah.
Okay, now we got to be real with ourselves. What else can we do to get this ideal life? Because I don't want to go for like, all right, I don't want to go for this good life.
Yeah.
I want to at least while we're here shoot for like this great ideal lifestyle. So like, then it became pretty obvious that I needed to start my own thing. And then it was just a matter of what that's going to be. I was in real estate, so I figured I'd stay in real estate, but like, could have been anything. The wake up call was realizing like, this is objective. These are the numbers, and whether or not I like it, that's how much it's going to cost to live this lifestyle. So that was the big wake up call. I remember those moments vividly of like coming to that realization. Now it's something I always look back on, like almost on a daily by daily basis of like, am I doing the things to get to this lifestyle? Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of writing out everything and dreaming big too, because you have something in your mind of like, hey, I want this, whatever your thing is. Maybe it's clothing, maybe it's cars, maybe it's family, maybe it's travel. Like, everybody has an aspiration of like something material or experience that they would love to have.
Yeah.
And you project that out, whether you write it down, put into AI, take a picture of it, whatever. And now it becomes real because it's a vision. You start to become afraid of it because you're like, oh, it's going to cost me this much money. I don't want it anymore.
Right.
And you start to have that fear of like, I'm so far away from this. And you start to compromise like, hey, I want the all-inclusive, the first class or private jet to Italy. And you manifest that, you visualize it, and then you see, oh, it costs this much. Florida's cool. I could do Florida.
Frontier is a good deal right now.
Like, that's how humans operate.
Yeah.
And we dream big and then we just push it down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is because we don't think we're worthy. And then also, on the other hand, people just don't want to put the work in for it. Like, you need to work towards something. And most people don't have that meaningful goal at the end of like, hey, I'm progressing towards that trip, that family, that big payout from my business, whatever.
Right.
So they just, go to the 9 to 5 and they just live paycheck to paycheck because they have no purpose. Yeah. Or someone just like, hey, why would I be qualified to be the one making $500,000 plus a year and have all these expenses? That's not for me. I don't need to do that. And you just compromise and you get worse and worse. So I love the idea of thinking big, but also understand there's going to be emotions that come from it. And your body's naturally going to say like, I don't need that. Let me scale back. How can I, maybe 1 car is cool, not 2 cars. You know?
It's super uncomfortable. Like this whole conversation, I want to make sure it's clear. Like, there's so many things I'm aiming towards that I'm not even close to.
Yeah.
Like I've done a few things well, and I'm really grateful for those experiences. But like, there's a lot of things that I'm striving towards that I've yet to get.
Yep.
But each moment I felt like I've had this success, it's like made me sick to my stomach before, because it's so uncomfortable because we haven't been in these positions. Like an example is like I started a meetup for short-term rentals in Austin. And like I'm up there with the microphone and there's 50 people in the room. And the whole time beforehand, I'm like, what could I possibly say that's going to help these people?
Yep.
Like I'm just this young guy, like everyone in the room is older than me. Like I'm actually sick to my stomach beforehand, like could not sleep the night before. Like that is so uncomfortable. And every time I've had this moment of growth, it's been something like that. It's like putting myself in an uncomfortable position, like starting my business. And I'm like, I could fail. Like everything. I'm just thinking about like the worst case scenarios. Right. And now I've completely reassessed how I want to think about like my future successes, where it's like, I want to actually flip that entirely. Like I want to think about what's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
And this is something I very rarely have thought about up until lately when I've started exploring some of the mindset work. I would always stay on the worst case. And I have a perfect example. Like when I was I was like 12 years old, I was playing soccer. I was in we were in the state championship. And like when you're at the end of the game, it's tied, like you're taking penalty kicks and you have 5 people that can take penalties. I was the 5th person in case we got to that point and we hadn't already won or lost by then. And it came down to me. So it was either I make it and we continue and we could win, or I miss and we lose the state finals. And I walk up and I'm like quaking.
Yeah.
And I go up there, I kick it right at the keeper. We lose. And my dad comes up to me after. He said, "What were you thinking when you were going to kick that ball?" And I was like, I was thinking that I was going to miss. And he's like, that's why that happened. And that did not hit me until like a few months ago, like how good of a lesson that was, right? Because at the time you're like, well, what are you going to do? Like, that's just how it is. But now you realize like we have more control over the way we're perceiving things. So it's like, what if we looked at everything in the best case scenario beforehand? What if we like took some time? I'll admit this, like before this conversation, like I took some time to think like, what if this conversation went as good as it could go? We're smiling, we're laughing, we're high-fiving, like, all those things. But beforehand, I might think like, what if I choked to my words, right? Like, what if I looked like an idiot?
Yep.
And maybe I still do, but like, at least I'm able to like reframe these challenging times or potential like growth moments of uncomfortability and like not dread them the same way, because I have acknowledged there's gonna have to be a lot of growth to get to where I want. So I at least, like you hear, like enjoy the journey. I at least want to enjoy the journey and not always like get sick to my stomach when I'm challenging myself.
Yeah.
But also I appreciate those symptoms, because it means you are pushing yourself. You are doing something hard.
Yeah.
Do you have a moment like that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say on both ends. I think about baseball. I remember this was probably similar age, 11 or 12 years old. And but up until this is like the best season I've ever played.
Yeah.
Regular season. Get into the playoffs, and it's the bottom of the 6th, 2 outs, I'm the 1 up. And like later in my career, I love those moments. I was like, give me that last at bat, like I'll take it.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody's like, oh, I hope it doesn't come to me. I'm just like, I'll do it. And I get up to the plate and counts 2-2. I watch a curveball go by. Still looked a little outside of me, but calls it strike 3, right? I watched the strike 3 go by.
Yeah.
And I walk back to the dugout after. I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like I hit home runs all year, and I can't be the one that even swings the bat when it matters the most. But before, I remember I was extremely nervous for that moment.
Yeah.
And I was just like dealing with so much regret. Like, what could I have done better? Should I have worked harder? It was like, no, you just need to show up mentally better.
Right.
And after that moment, I just reframed it of like, if I'm in the field, give me the ball. If I'm up to the plate, let me take the last at bat. Like maybe it's not going to go perfect every time, but like I want that situation. Like it's going to make me better. I'm going to approach it with more confidence going forward.
Yeah.
And I remember this was my senior year of high school. I was like late to a game. I was running a landscaping business in high school.
Right.
And I was like trying to like help out some clients before the game. So I'm driving to the game, hit some traffic. I miss warm-ups, and I'm just like nervous the whole car ride. I'm like, what if I am late, blah, blah, blah. And I just like slow down. I'm just like, let's put on some music. Like, it's going to be okay. And I started to build this confidence. And I go into this game with no warm-ups, no nothing. I'm literally like running to the dugout as the inning starts, the first inning. A little bit later in the game, we're playing the best team in our district.
Right.
And I hit a grand slam. I'm just like, that's it. That's the defining difference of like, here's one kid who is nervous. He's not confident. And then here's another one that's just like, I've prepared. I'm confident. Give me whatever situation you're going to throw at me. I'll handle it.
Yeah.
And it's a vastly different outcome between those two different preparation moments.
100%. 100%. Like like for RBI, the Little League team we coach, so what was it, 12U? 13U? 14U.
Yeah.
I should know that. But like you can see a lot of the time, like not just the actual ability difference in the players, but like the way they're showing up, you can tell pretty quickly like who is going to be successful.
Yeah.
Just by the way they're walking in, you know, are they like little things like, are they greeting the coach? Are they saying like, hey, how's it going? Are they coming up like with energy, or is their head down like, all right, here we go again? Like it's super interesting, like looking at these younger generations, because like they're microcosms of like what we do and we're older, right? They're just like, it's so raw and authentic. Like the person that shows up to work with their head slouched, like they're not gonna have their head slouched because they're at work. They got to be professional, but like it's the same thing because it's all happening up here, rather than just like actually sometimes it manifests into body language as well. But like there's so many lessons we can pull from the kids we coach, and like how you show up dictates a lot of the results. And it's really interesting to see like how much confidence also plays into that. Like what I've been starting to look into is like how many self-limiting beliefs we have, and they start at a really young age. So like there's little things that we don't even understand that we possess, like, and it starts from when you're born and you start hearing things from your parents. Right? Like they're gonna say like, hey, we shouldn't eat there, it's too expensive, stuff like that. Or like, don't try that, it's too hard. Don't do a marathon, like that's too many miles and you're gonna hurt yourself. Stuff like that. Like those things stick. So we're seeing that in a very pure form with the kids we're coaching. It's like, we're also seeing how their parents are talking to them, and we are responsible too for how we're gonna talk to them and potentially build their confidence, because those are much more transformative years of like, you know, you're impressionable on the things you're hearing. And it goes back to environment. It goes back to like also just like the dialogue we have with ourselves and from other people. So like there's so much to this, which I didn't understand had such a strong impact on me and you and everyone, is like what we're hearing from, especially from a young age. Because from my understanding, it comes through the subconscious mind. So like up until a certain age, like we have no filter on that subconscious mind. So we just accept the information for what it is. So if someone tells you like, hey, you're not good enough, like you're probably just going to believe that. And that's going to sit with you. And that could sit with you potentially forever if you don't start like cracking down these self-limiting beliefs. But like then our subconscious mind dictates our behaviors, and then our behaviors dictate our actions, and our actions dictate our results. Like it all starts from like these things you hear at a young age. So like it's super fascinating understanding that information and then seeing it applied to this team, because that's the most exposure I have right now without kids to like the youth. Right. But now that I understand that and see it, it's like it almost makes me double down on my commitment to inspire them and help them grow and develop the self-confidence, because you realize how much further that's going to go than a baseball field.
Yeah. There's some crazy statistic out there that like parents of young kids say no like 10 times more than they say yes. And it's like, can I go outside? No. Can I eat this? No. Can I do this? No. Do you climb up on the table? No. And you're trying to reinforce good behavior and say like, hey, do this instead. But it comes across as no. Like, stop.
Right.
You're doing the bad thing. And all of a sudden that repetition, like what you're saying of like, you were told things at a very young age, the most simple thing of yes and no. Yes, hey, you're doing good. Keep at it. No, this is bad. Change up your behavior. Eventually you're just going to be like, I'm just terrible. Like I can't do this. You're going to stop taking action towards things. Or like, I'm sure you can relate to it. You're younger age and you're like, hey mom and dad, can I go do this? No. Can I do this? No. You just stop asking. You stop putting yourself out there, stop taking action because you're like, oh, the answer is going to be no. Like how much does that just form your behavior later in life because you've been told no your entire life and now you just slowly stop going towards those things. So I think it's very interesting how we're raised, and like we as a society, like we've got away from like real competition, which I think competition is so healthy, but like you need to understand like the true nature of competition. It's not like, hey, everybody gets a participation trophy, and it doesn't need to be cutthroat of like, hey, like these kids in class are going to be like the elite and then the rest of you, like, we don't care about you. It needs to be something where like, hey, we want you to become better and like respect your opponent, respect the classmates or the teammates you have, and grow together. Like understand like, hey, this person has a better trait than me or a better skill, but I need to work harder to bring up my level of, you know, confidence, my level of competence in this given task, because it's eliminated now. Like everybody just like, hey, you're doing great. Or if you're just adequate at something, you're just like, nope, let's try something different. And later in life, you're just like, I have nothing to show for it because either I'm not good enough or I'm just told no, like don't do this. So it's a dangerous place to be. And I'm excited to like see how our generation starts to raise kids, because I think it'll be a lot different. Where like we're really pushing people to become better. I mean, there's just a huge mindset shift in society now of like actually going for things, not just being status quo. Yeah,
it is cool. And I think specifically in a place like Austin, like we are very encouraged to think bigger.
Yeah,
because we've been exposed to people that are thinking bigger. I think also like so much of it is nurture, and at a certain age you got to like take your own responsibility and accountability. But like at the beginning, something I'll give my parents credit for is they always said, you can do whatever you want. Like, what do you want to do? I want to be an MLB player. Like, okay, go do it. Like, how are we going to do that?
Yeah.
Like, they always preach, like, truly the world is your oyster. And that's something I'm noticing now. It's like, how many people are, and again, I always want to, like, remind myself there's things that I'm not doing. I still have these limitations I'm trying to face. But, like, one of the things I ask myself is, like, am I thinking big enough? Like, you know, like for my friends too, I always try to challenge them. I'm like, are we thinking big enough? No one is going to win by us thinking small. That's what I've also acknowledged. Like, I want to make sure, like, at the end of the day, I did things that like made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That like pushed my boundaries, that like challenged myself, that I'm genuinely proud of. One of the questions I loved, and this is one of the questions I asked myself when I was like going through my vivid vision, writing the things that I wanted, was, if you had no limits and knew you could not fail, what would you do? Like, you could do whatever you want, right? Like, what would you do? And that's the question. Like my ultimate goal is like have a loving family. That's my number one right now. And it's a question I'll like when the day comes and there's children in my life, like I'm always going to be trying to have them think about that, because I think the truth is they very likely can get what they want. And most people, when they think about it, they like put these restraints on themselves. They're like, oh, I would like $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, that's not the question. Like, if you had no limits and knew you could not fail, what would you do? Like, think deeper into it.
Yep.
And then let's discuss, like, all right,
How do we get there?
like, how do we get there? Is that realistic? Like, of course, there's got to be some realistic boundaries, but like, for the most part, like, take out the boundaries and like take out the limitations, and then let's think about, can we do that? Like, all right.
This reminds me of the book, The Magic of Thinking Big. Have you read it?
No.
Okay, it's a really good one. Highly recommend to you and the audience. But the first section, they were talking about like this sales team, and the author's sharing a story where this team is going over their performance reviews, and the top salesman sold, or his salary was like $500,000 for the year, and second place was like $50,000. I forget the exact numbers, but he 10x'd whatever the next person was.
Right.
And the manager is in front of the team, and they're just like, hey, Ryan 10x'd you guys. Is it because he worked 10 times harder? No. Is it because he knows 10 times more than you guys? No. Does he have 10 times more connections? No. Did he do 10 times more outreach? No. What he did was he thought 10 times bigger than all of you.
Yeah.
Like, that's as simple as it is.
Yeah.
The whole game of personal development is so dangerous because we always think like, I need more. I need more. I need to read the next book. I need to listen to the next podcast because I just need more information. If information was the factor that mattered the most, you'd be rich by now, and you'd be set because everybody's doing the things of talking to people and networking and reading articles. You know, we all do it.
Right.
What you're avoiding is actually putting in the work. And once you put in the work, what is your mindset behind it? Is it, I'm just going to make ends meet, or is it, I'm going to take over this industry and be a disruptor?
Yeah.
That's a personal conversation. Like you're saying, like, take away all limiting beliefs. Like, what is that thing that you would go for, and how would it be achieved?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you're like, yeah, I'm going to have a side hustle. But if you treat a side hustle like a side hustle, it's always going to stay that way. Or if you're like, I want to start this business, but like, you know, I'm cool with just like 100K a year, but it could go to 100 million. Like, you're cutting yourself, or you're selling yourself so short, and it starts with the mind.
Yeah. I mean, this is a controversial person, but like Elon Musk, if you look at what he's doing, like he is trying to go to the moon.
Yeah.
Like that is absurd. Like, he is genuinely making attempts to go and like create human life on the moon. And what is the difference between us and him? Like we still have blood and flesh. Like he just thinks significantly bigger. Like most of these people that we admire, we're in awe of, they're just humans.
Yep.
Like just humans. They just have removed a lot of limitations, and they have at least granted themselves the freedom to think bigger. Like they've tapped into the free will, because what is so interesting is no one is telling us not to think or like use our imagination. Like that is something we have access to 24/7.
Yeah.
And the person that's preventing that most of the time is ourselves. And it's super interesting. Like once, and like this again is like part of the journey I've been going on the last few months, is like, what are we, like, what is stopping us? Like, what are the roadblocks? Like for me, like one of the things was like, I wasn't going to be the guy that was going to try. And then it's like, now I got to break that down. Or like committing to an idea. That's another thing. Like you need to face those truths, as we were talking about earlier. It's like, and it's a little scary, so not everyone wants to go down this path. But the investment I'm making and the idea in my head is like, it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
Like even though it could be perceived as harder, I think for me it's going to be way more fulfilling than if I were to just stay in like a job and stay comfortable.
Yeah.
I think that's in that self-betterment, personal development space. I think that's an investment a lot of people are making.
Yeah.
Is like, it's worth it.
For sure. And why do you want it too?
Yeah.
You could have an idea, but why is that so important to you? Yeah. Uncovering that will spark so much motivation and inspiration for you.
Yeah.
Because you might have an idea and be like, I don't know why this is an idea for me. And you don't take action because it's not meaningful. But if you have that why behind you, my coach calls it the burn. And he calls it the burn because it's the one thing that keeps you going on days that you don't want to do anything, but also the day after you win.
Right.
So you flip a nice house. And you're like, hey, big win. Bank account looks good. I want to sleep in the next day. What would actually get you up to do it again? You know, there's only a few things that could probably come to mind.
Yeah.
But if you uncover, this is why I want to succeed in life. This is why I want to excel. This is why I'm qualified for this. Now those passion projects, that side hustle, those big ideas you have become so much more realistic because it's tied to an attachment. This could be making your parents proud. This could be proving yourself right. This could be, I want to achieve this later in life. I don't know. It's individual for everyone. But if you can remind yourself every day, this is why I'm doing what I do, it's comes so much more clear. And you now have a purpose of, I'm doing this for a reason.
Yeah. So good. That is so good and on point. Do you feel like you have a why right now that's in the back of your head?
Absolutely. Yeah. I go back to, I want to be the exact person that I say that I am. You know, I'm huge on like living to a high standard and like leading by example. But like, there's been times in life where I've messed up and I've had people that I care about deeply say like, what are you doing? Like, and it's tough because like you put out this image of yourself of like, hey, I'm doing great, you know, great kid. I got this stuff going, and you make a mistake and people start to doubt you. It's like, I never want that to happen again, especially people that you love and respect. It's like, not worth it. So for me, like spending the last several years, like building that up and being like, I want to be a better man in every area of my life. Okay, now if I'm portraying that and I'm training a client or I'm posting something on social media and I'm saying these things or I'm acting a certain way, I want that to be the exact person that I am all the time. So nobody ever has doubt. Nobody's ever like, you know, I really don't know who you are. Like, I'd never want to hear that. So that's my why of like, prove myself right. Prove myself to other people like I am who I say I am. And, you know, it's the only real satisfaction that matters to me, you know, because it's your character. And a lot of people now don't have integrity or they don't care about character and they'll compromise on different things. Like, that's not me. Like I care about it so much, and I want the people around me to know like Matt's taking care of business for himself, but I can also rely on him to take care of business for me.
That's good.
Thank you.
And that's sustainable, right? Like, that's something I feel like, especially knowing you, like you will not waver from that. Like for me, I think I have like different seasons, like where like I have some fundamental underline wise, but then like I also, what's helped me is like attaching to like certain goals in that season. Yeah. Like one of my big whys when I was starting the business was my dad had never been abroad. Like he's one of the more frugal ones to exist. And he's helped me go on these trips with my friends to Europe and like, you know, been so supportive around that. And I'm like that hit me so hard. Like, I want to help you go and experience this. He's trying to retire right now. Like, he hasn't traveled. He wants to travel. My why, like something I always would look back on is like, how can I sponsor a trip for my dad to go to Europe? And I want to pay for everything. Like, that's something, and I would, like, we can get into like vision boards and like manifesting all that stuff. Like, it was as simple as like, I kept looking at like photos of like Roland Garros, French Open. I'm going to take him to Paris. And like, if I was in the dumps, I would just be like, all right, what do I do this for? Like, then I would actually close my eyes, think about looking to my right, and I see my dad and I see the clay courts, and it's just like this happy moment. I'm like, shit, like that's right around the corner. All right, I'm just going to go make that call.
That's so cool.
I'm going to go do that thing that I was avoiding, you know, and like you get excited about it. So, and like I could tie this into coaching too, because I know, I mean, we coach, you do your own coaching. Like I coach short-term rental operators how to like scale their business. Yeah. And one of the very first questions, and this is not an original thought, this is from the other coaches that coached me because I went through the same course, is what do you want, right? We talked about like identifying what you want, like spending time to think about that, but then why? Like what's that going to get you? And usually it's a number, especially in this business setting for short-term rental businesses. It's what do you want? Okay, you want $20,000 a month. Great. We can definitely get there. Why do you want it? What's that going to do for you? What's it going to do for your family, your relationships, your health, your lifestyle, your mindset? Like figuring all the what's out are great, like what you want, but like the why I think is a differentiator. Like how strong the burn, right? Like I like that. Like in Think and Grow Rich, it's like the burning desire, right? Like that's what they talk about. How strong is that desire? And from what I have seen, just based on the students that I've coached, the ones with the stronger why are without a doubt more successful than the ones with the why of like, I just want to get out of my job, or I just want this car. Someone, you know, I coach a single mom. She has 4 kids. She's trying to get out of her job so she can spend more time with her children.
Yeah.
And the short-term rental business, part of the reason I chose it is because at a certain point, you can hire and delegate and systematize to a point where you can live your life by design. And that's something I'm really pushing right now, is like helping people live their lives by design. And she is doing everything because her why is so strong. She wants to spend time with her kids. Like it does not get stronger. I mean, there's certain health things that can come up. Like for the most part, that's one of the strongest whys we can have.
Oh, it's the number one. I mean, I think most parents would die for their kids. I don't even think health is more important than it.
Right.
So.
And I don't even understand that feeling yet.
Yeah.
But like from what I've seen, like, that is one of the biggest ones. But like it goes back to the strength of that why, especially for a lot of these students. A lot of the players we coach, it's like, you know, some of them don't want to play baseball, like, right?
Yep.
So it's like, because their why's that strong, it's like the odds of them succeeding are going to be likely lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just don't give a crap. And that's fine.
The why is so important because it's fuel. So in the book, The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer brings up a really good example of energy and using this why as fuel. So the story goes like this guy is sleep deprived. He's not sleeping. He's very low on energy, right? And all he wants to do is lay in bed, rest up. He's has an interest in a girl. Girl reaches out and says like, "Hey, I want to see you." Well, you get that text, you're jumping out of bed and you're like, "Let's go!" You know,
shoes are already on.
Yeah, super excited. Where does that energy come from? You know, like you could be like the lowest energy level, your Ring or Whoop or whatever could tell you like, hey, you need to rest for the next 48 hours. But then all of a sudden one thing happens and all of a sudden you have a spark of energy that could last you days. Where does that come from? That's not physical. It's all mental, emotional, spiritual. That why or that thing that excites you right now can make you do anything, no matter what state you're in. So I think really tapped into that will give you so much more clarity and purpose of, hey, I am grinding like crazy. I'm tired, doing all these different things. I'm traveling, but this is important to me. And you remember that and you close your eyes and you see that vision with your dad and you're like, this is it. There's that spark of energy. It could last you 2 hours, but that 2 hours puts in more work than you would have done ever.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for.
Yeah. 100%. And it takes like, for me, it took a lot of thought behind like, what are my whys? You know, because it's like when you don't have like that traumatic event or that like huge catalyst event, right? Like you need to give more thought to like, what is your true why? Like you need to dig deeper.
Yeah.
Like you hear these stories too. It's like, and these are incredible stories. Like, and I just have now learned about like the law of polarity where like, if something traumatic or tragic happens, like usually there's an equal benefit on the other side of that experience. Like you hear the story of like, I lost this relative, right? But it inspired me to start this company that led to all this success, right? Like when you don't have that big catalyst event, like for me, I don't, like I've had some events, but they haven't been like, you know, heavily traumatic like some other people have experienced. So it took like a lot more thinking of like, what's really motivating me? And at first I thought it was money, but that's so not what it was. And it was like, I would like, and I think money is very important and valuable, but it really is for me an instrument to get these other things, the quality time, the memories with my closest relationships, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to like take the time to explore that for yourself and like what's actually driving us. And I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But it takes some thought.
Yeah. I think also like in your situation, I'm very similar. Like I never had that like huge moment that's like things need to change, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it goes back to childhood and like your fuel will be like something you enjoy in the past. So like something you mentioned was your parents always told you like you can do whatever you want. That's a quality that you now want to implement for your next family. And you're like, hey, my wife and kids, I want there to be just an abundance of trust and confidence and, you know, support to do whatever the hell that they want. And I'm going to be all in with them because you got that from your parents.
Yes.
It could be someone who they grew up, you know, playing sports and they have a love for sports. They fall out of it. Now they start this business around sports because that's what interested them in the past.
Yes.
And on the complete opposite end, it could be someone who, you know, grew up in an abusive family and now they go on to change the world because they're giving back to charity and they're starting these different things to end that crisis in America. So that is like such an important thing of like your why is probably already experienced. So tap into that of like what is really important to you because you're probably going to go back to that or just do the complete opposite if it was traumatic.
Yes. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It sparks so many personal thoughts, but like I agree. Like I think we have every single answer we need already within us. We're just not tapping into those thoughts or those experiences. And it's especially the negative ones, which are arguably the ones that shape us the most. Like those are the ones that get pushed down real deep, back of the closet. You know, you can't even access that box sometimes. But like for me, I'm pulling out this box. I'm trying to get that information because I'm figuring that's going to be the most valuable information to like remove the barriers and the self-limiting beliefs to get to these other things.
Yeah.
One of my examples is like that commitment thing I mentioned. Like I think a lot of that stems from my parents getting divorced, and I was pretty involved in that. And it was something like I took so many lessons from. Like you said, like we can look back at what's already happened. Like I've taken so many lessons from that and now made it a point to like understand the value of committing to like relationships. Right now that's friendships. And it is like one of my main missions is to have like I said, a loving, sustained family. Yeah. Like, and control that as much as I possibly can. Like that's for me a lot of like where my why stemmed from, like my deeper why of like family and like quality time with them and like teaching like love. Like I for some time I didn't even believe in that. And now it's like, again, it starts with effort. Effort comes along this equation too, where it's like I'm putting an effort to explore this like thought that always like, you know, was heavy on me. Yeah. And we all, again, we all have our own version of that. That's so good. Dude, it's crazy.
Love that.
Human mind, man.
Yeah. How do you define success?
I knew you'd ask this question. I would say getting really clear on what you want and putting yourself in a position to achieve that on a daily basis. So that could be that family, right? For some people, maybe it's that Lamborghini, but like, if that's really genuinely what you want and your why is strong enough to get you that thing, then as long as you are making progress towards that, you will achieve it. And that to me is a successful person. I think a lot of it's just like being super intentional about our enjoyment, right? Like how many days can I have with my friends and family and, you know, the laughter and the new memories, that kind of stuff. So I think that's, to me, what I would say.
That's good. I love it. What is one thing you believe in that most people would disagree with?
I'll go down the real estate route for this.
Okay.
I think most people are looking at their expenses all wrong. So like I just spent $7.50 on this cup of coffee. That's a lot of money for a cup of coffee.
Yep.
I don't really care though, because my housing expense is incredibly low. You probably know the house hack thing. Like the point is, people are looking at the wrong expense items. If we're looking at our number one expense, it's typically housing, and it's not your cups of coffee. Mm-hmm. So focus on the housing part. How can we minimize that expense? There's a few strategies. One of them is what I did, bought a house, rented out the rooms, offset the payments on the mortgage, and now my monthly living expenses are incredibly low. Mm-hmm. So I've just deducted $1,500 from my monthly expenses. So this is not as big of a deal. Yeah. So I
like that.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah. A lot of people can relate to that too.
Let's focus on the bigger line items.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Last question. Someone that wants to be successful in life, they want to go down that path. They don't know where to start. What is one piece of advice to leave them with?
I would say take time to figure out what your ideal life looks like. Like truly go out and give it thought. And I know it gets busy. Like life can get very busy if you don't like take control of it. So like go out in nature. Like I think that's what helped me a lot. Like, be with the elements, like give yourself the space and the freedom to think, and then like write it all out. Mm-hmm. Like I truly think like once you see it all, you're like, this is amazing. It's super motivating. Like you said, that energy that can come out. Like you can create that energy for yourself. It doesn't always have to be from an external source. So like write out this dream life and then make sure it's authentic to you. If it's not authentic to you, you'll know, because it goes into that why. You'll stop taking the actions you're supposed to. Mm-hmm. But if it's authentic to you and aligns with why, you're seeing exactly what your ideal life can look like. I think that will motivate you to look in the mirror and assess things like your environment, the people you're surrounding yourself with, the books you're reading, what you're doing on a Friday night, all these things that can factor into success.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
That's what I'd say, man.
So good.
Yeah.
Dude, you're a legend.
Thank you, dude.
So glad we had this conversation and just continuing to grow together and drawing inspiration from one another. Like we have a great community around us, and being able to be in a leadership position too, coaching a baseball team, youth baseball team, and helping implement some of these practices, but to just show hard work, dedication, fun to people that need it the most. So keep doing what you're doing, and excited to see everything you accomplish.
Yes, likewise, dude.
Thank you.
Let's go.